You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
This is the Hammock Hangers Podcast, where we hang out and talk about everything from hammocks and hammock camping to the group hangs from around the country. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Hammock Hangers Podcast. I am your host, Paul Collins, or Skunk Ape. Pheonix is back with me again this week to touch on the topic of tarps and quilts and how to use them to help keep you warm in cooler weather. We talk about tarps with and without doors and the best way to pitch them, and also about full-length quilts versus three-quarter quilts and whether to get them with extra length and width or not. Now let's go ahead and get on with the show and hear some more from Pheonix. All right, everybody. We are back this week with AJ, or also known as Pheonix. He is going to do another one of his, I guess, mindless ramblings, so to say.
Completely mindless. Completely.
I think, what are you going to talk about this week, AJ?
Well, we had kind of a rare occasion at HangCon this year where it got pretty darn chilly for Florida. And not only was it chilly at night, I think one night it got down to 28. It stayed pretty chilly during the day, too. And I will say, like, cumulatively, I believe that this was our coldest HangCon that I've ever been to. Now, granted, I've been to other hang cons where one night it got down to like 23 degrees or 25 degrees, but that was only one night, and it wasn't that cold like during the day. But and that was also at Doe Lake, right off the water, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. But at Sertoma, it was definitely overall the coldest hang con that we've had at the new location.
Right. So for consecutive nights, all
consecutive nights, yeah. So I wanted to kind of talk about what I think in my experiences and failures of trying to stay warm in a hammock when it is in the cooler months. Now, granted, I'm going to say that, I'm originally from Virginia. So, I kind of have an idea of winter. I did a lot of camping, growing up, and we would camp in the winter. But I'm in no way like some of those folks in Minnesota that get down to like negative 40. That's a little lower than my tail wants to get out there in.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure we're going to have a few people kind of chuckling at us this week.
Well, I'm sure.
We're just talking about the cold weather while they're up there, in the teens and everything right now. So
my cutting point is if I don't set up my gear completely perfect, I don't mind being uncomfortable. That is a risk that I'm willing to take. However, if it's going to get to the temperature where if my gear is not set up perfectly, death is a possibility, then that's a no-go. That's a no-go. But I will also say, and a lot of people don't realize this unless you live here, Florida is hot. It's hot as all get out most of the year. But the cold in Florida is very different as well. Our humidity makes a 30 degree here feel a whole lot colder than, let's say, a 30 degree from up north.
Right.
That's something that I always found, even if it's 40 degrees in Florida feels a whole lot colder than 40 degrees in Virginia ever did.
It's a lot damper. I mean, it feels like it just sticks to you. A lot more, and it kind of soaks in or something. I don't know. But
it chills you to your bones.
Yes,
it really does.
Yep.
So, so I want to start talking about like how can your tarp selection affect your comfort and staying warm. So, I have a lot of tarps. That was one thing that I discovered while I was packing and unpacking and repacking from HangCon. I think last year I went through like a series where I just bought like a lot of tarps. That was one of the things, I guess, the year of the tarp was last year because I acquired quite a few. And some have doors and some do not, and some have half doors, which are really, really cool. I really like that concept. I know, Dutch does some things with his. I don't have any of Dutch with half doors, but I own quite a few war bonnet tarps. They're thunder flies, they're mini flies, they're mountain flies, and they don't have doors that go all the way down. They kind of like slant up, and they offer like a really cool kind of setup. They offer that protection from the rain and stuff, but you're still not having to crawl under or take the whole door out when
Right.
you want to get into your hammock. However, when you're talking about like cold weather and your top priority is staying warm, those doors do make a big difference. Not only because in Florida, a lot of the times you get the rain with the cold. Um, and the biggest factor when you're trying to stay warm is not necessarily the overall temperature, it's really the wind. The wind is the biggest factor about your comfort in the cold because wind. I remember I've gone on trips where I thought, oh, the low's only supposed to be down like 67, and that's still pretty warm. But if the wind came through, I remember a backpacking trip that I actually took with my son to Hidden Pond here on the Florida Trail. It was March. Like the temperature was supposed to get to like 67 at the absolute lowest. So like an idiot, I was like, oh, I should be fine. We don't need underquilts. I'm not going to hike them out. If I don't need it, we'll be fine. However, there was a wind that was coming through there, and both me and my son, we froze our butts off at 67 degrees. So yes, it can happen, friends. It can happen. Now, the tarp, the doors definitely help block out that wind, help hold in and retain that heat that you're building up inside, kind of like hotboxing yourself in your tarp. Your pitch really needs to be kind of not necessarily storm mode, but definitely like really, really close and really, really low, just to mitigate any type of wind draft that's going to come from the sides. If you don't have doors or underneath, the closest that you can have that contained while still being comfort is going to be beneficial versus having your tarp really, really high and giving yourself as much room. While that's really, really nice, that's really not helpful when you're trying to conserve heat. So you also want to think about how the wind is coming in, and that's really going to affect how and the direction that you want to set your tarp in. You really want to set your tarp where the wind is coming from the sides. So again, the side of your tarp, which is covering most of your setup, is going to block that wind. You don't want to set it up into the wind because it's going to come and blow right through. And the other things that you're using to stay warm, they're going to work so much less efficiently because that wind, even the best of setups with the best quilts, is still going to rob a lot of heat from you.
Right. You'd essentially be set up inside of a tunnel.
Yeah,
at that point.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really like that I try to have on all my tarps is the tarp pullouts. Now, the tarp pullouts aren't going to help necessarily specifically with heat retention. However, if you are facing with a lot of wind, the tarp pullouts can help your tarp hold its shape even in really, really heavy wind. And it also just gives you that, that structure where the sides of your tarp are not, blowing on you and, laying on your face or something like that. And I just like the space that it provides, even when I'm set up in a winter mode or a storm mode. It just adds that little bit of extra lift to the side, especially like if you're claustrophobic.
Right.
That can be kind of intense. But yeah, the tarp pullouts definitely help with that space value. And also, one of the big differences, when people are talking about, what type of tarps to get, and we always ask, so what type of camping you want to do? And, if people are saying, hey, I want a backpack, what material do you suggest people buy?
I use mainly DCF,
All
because
right.
of
So
being light and 100% waterproof.
absolutely. If you're hiking, absolutely. Your Dyneema fabric, your Cuban fiber used to be called,
Yep.
that's kind of the go-to. What some people need to realize about Cuban fiber tarps is Cuban fiber is only cut in narrower sheets than your regular nylon. So normally, your the coverage of a Dyneema tarp is going to be less, just because it's usually not as wide as your sil poly, your sil nylon. And there is some exceptions to that. Like for example, hammock gears. They're Winter Palace,
Yep.
specifically designed for the maximum protection that you can get. They have to actually add another panel of Dyneema fabric to the bottom to get it to the width of a normal winter tarp that you would have made out of sil nylon or sil poly,
Right.
or the silicone membrane um, fabrics that Dutch and Ripstop they sell. So just keep that in mind if you're in the market for a tarp and are weighing your options. I mean, Dyneema tarps are crazy awesome and really, really nice, but there are some downsides to that as well. So take that in consideration when you're dropping, $300-$400 in some cases on a tarp. And I know the Winter Palaces and the really, really wide Dyneema tarps there, they fetch a pretty penny.
Yes, without a doubt.
So let's see. So moving on to quilts, quilts, quilts. I can't talk enough about quilts. I personally don't really have too much experience, if any, when it comes to pads. I never used a pad, with the exception of my Haven. Um, but if I'm looking to really, really, really stay warm with a guarantee that I'm going to sleep comfort, quilts are all the way to go. I wouldn't even consider a pad. Um, so a lot of people ask, would you like to do down or synthetic? And I've kind of gone back and forth between the two. There's definitely some huge benefits to synthetic. I've got a couple. I've got one of my favorite quilts. It's a custom made um, New River underquilt from Arrowhead Equipment. It's a climate shield. It is massive. It is like 52 inches wide. It comes about the sides. It is really the set it and forget it kind of thing. And I'm taking that thing down to in the low, either high teens or low 20s, and been perfectly comfortable. But it's not light, and it does not pack down very small at all.
So you're
At
not
all.
really camping or not really hiking with it.
No, no, no. I'm not hiking with
Yeah.
that. But crazy warm, not light, not compact at all, but keeps you warm. It really depends on what your values.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of the up quilts that I have from Cedar Ridge Outdoors. They've been great. Um, I am kind of maybe leaning more toward going more to down. Um, Now you may ask why. I mean, because I love my synthetics. The comfort that I get with down
Yeah.
is just, I mean, up gets close, but overall, just
Yeah.
down is just a different level of comfort, especially on a top quilt.
Yeah. Up is the closest thing to down. I mean, I've only got one synthetic, which is an up. The rest of mine are down. Um, I usually go with down because I do more hiking than car camping, so to say. So, of course, I always try and keep it as light as possible and also being able to pack down, more. So,
I think also, and I'll speak for like myself included. When I was first starting into really seriously camping, down kind of scared me. Um, you know, it's really expensive. Like it's not cheap.
Right.
Um, and people talk about, oh, if it gets wet, it doesn't work. Um, and so there's always that fear. And as a backpacker, you pack your fear some of the time.
Of course.
Where, oh well, what if this gets wet? There's been some huge innovations in down, where I've seen videos of people like taking a fistful of down, soaking it in water, and it's still retaining the loft.
Right.
Now, if you're hiking on the AT like you did, and I'm sure on the AT it never rained
No,
at
never.
all, never.
No. Sunshine and rainbows the whole way.
Yeah, whole way. So if you're in repetitive moisture, or very high humid, or just soaked, then it could work. But if you're just going for like a weekend backpacking trip, as long as you're relatively careful, you're going to be fine.
Right.
And I know, like, we had this conversation in a recent trip that we took together. We were kind of like shocked, like, hey, have you ever washed your quilts? And a lot of us were like, no, just because throwing my $300 quilt
Yeah.
in the wash machine seems very counterintuitive. So if you're out there
I
and
still
you're
haven't done
listening,
mine. I know you just done yours.
I did. So if you're out there and you're terrified of throwing your quilts in the wash, you are not alone. You are not alone.
Well, see, my biggest fear is that I'm going to throw it in there and it's going to run its cycle, and I'm going to come back to take it out of the washer to put into the dryer, and I'm going to open up the washer and there's just going to be a bunch of feathers in the washer.
Oh, trust me, it was on my head. I was just like, well, I've got other quilts that this doesn't fall through, but not everybody does that.
No, it's still a money thing, though. I mean, I don't care how many quilts I have. I know what I spend on my quilts.
Yeah,
and it's just a fear. I mean, but I mean, at the same time, the quilts that I do have, from Hammock Gear and Loco Libre and some of the others, I know they're good quality made quilts.
Yeah.
So, I know that there probably will not be any issues unless it's stupidity on my part, of course.
And that's the problem. Like, I am clumsy. If anybody's going to mess something up, I'm going to mess it up. But my experience here very recently, I washed a set of 40-degree hammock gear quilts that I had, that I've had for maybe 5 years, and I've never washed, and I've used them quite a bit. They smelled like butt, and they were really, really bad. And so I just had to say, all right, if I ever had to let someone borrow these, I could no longer be friends with them, because they would just bring them back and go, did you die in these? Did you bury a body in these? So, so we have a front load, wash machine.
Right.
So what I was able to do, and you can follow this, I make no promises, but this is what I did, and it absolutely worked. I put 2 quilts in there. I unsnapped all my snaps. I put out my draw cord so they were all stretched out as far as they would go. I threw the top quilt, under quilt in the washer. I put 3 ounces of the Nick Wax down wash in there, and I set my wash to a delicate cycle.
Now, let me ask you a question real quick. You said that you put the down wash in there, 3 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
Did you put it in the detergent dispenser, or did you just put it directly in? Okay.
I don't think it really matters, but I would probably put it in the dispenser. That's just what I did.
I didn't know if it would matter or not. I wasn't sure if you needed to put it straight in on the quilts.
Right. I know a lot of people wash theirs in the tub. I just didn't want to be on my knees that long. I wanted the lazy way out. So I put it on a delicate wash, and I told my washer to do 2 extra rinse cycles, because you really want to make sure that you get as much, if not all, of the soap out of the quilts before you put them in the dryer.
Gotcha.
Ran that. They finished that. I opened the door.
What
There
water
wasn't
temperature?
feathers. I think it was cold. I
Okay.
think it was just tap water cold.
Okay.
And I made sure that I lifted them from the bottom, because you don't want to, pull them up, because, your quilts are very heavy at this point and you don't want to rip any of the baffles. So I
Gotcha.
lifted them from the bottom, put them in my dryer, drew the 2 quilts in the dryer and 5 tennis balls.
Okay.
And I actually I set my dryer to the lowest possible heat, and I actually had to do it in 1 hour increments. And so it took me 6 hours
Oh, wow.
to dry. And after 3 hours, I kind of took them out and kind of like manually broke up some of the, more bigger wads of still wet down in there. The tennis balls definitely help a lot, but I, manually broke apart some of the clumps, threw them back in there for an hour. And so I just wanted to make sure that these quilts were bone dry.
Right.
They may have been done before then, but I just wanted to be absolutely sure, because I don't want my down to mold.
Right.
And after 6 hours, took them out. They were dry. I didn't have any feathers. Well, let me take that back. I didn't have a lot of feathers. You're going to lose a little bit because they're going to make their way through and stuff like that. So my kids' clothes that were dried after I did my quilts, they had some feathers on their clothes. So that was kind of funny. But nothing to the point where I was just like, oh my gosh, I've ruined my quilts. So
Gotcha.
it can be done, and they definitely lofted up a whole lot more than when I put them in, when they were like covered in sweat and befugliness.
So now the real question is, how did it smell afterwards? Did it
It
still
did
smell
not
like
smell
butt?
like butt. It did not smell like butt. I
That's
would have been, I would
a
have been,
plus.
yeah, I would have been fine lending these quilts out to other people now that they did not smell like. I've used these quilts for 5 years and I've never washed them. So
Yeah, I
if
need to
you're
wash
out there and
mine.
you're listening, it can be done. It really is easy. You just need to be careful and, not be stupid. So they can be washed in the washer. Moving on. So down synthetic, personal preference. Synthetic is going to be a little bit cheaper, but down, especially for a top quilt, I would really lean toward down. Another, and this is a minor detail, I think, in my experience, no matter what synthetic that I use, down instantly feels warmer.
Right.
Where synthetic, it'll get you there, but it kind of takes a little bit while to build up the heat. Down, you put it on, you almost instantly feel that warmth. And so, but again, you're paying for that premium. All right. So as far as the temperature rating, people ask like, what type of quilts do I need to get? I think both of us, our go-to under is a 20 degree, correct?
Yep. I know it's mine.
If I'm like backpacking and, weight is going to be an issue, which is not very often for me, I might go for my 40 degree just because a little bit less weight. But if I'm just as go a 20 degree, the thing is, in my experience, and this is my how I sleep, I have no problem using a 0 degree underquilt when it's in the 50s. I really don't feel, as far as an underquilt, a 0 degree feels any warmer than a 20 or a 30 when it gets really below 50 degrees. You're just going to be warm. However, on the flip side, I will definitely not use a 0 degree top quilt when it's 50 degrees.
Right.
You definitely feel a lot more of that heat retention, and you get downright hot in a top quilt. So if you're looking, the ranges of where you want to be, a good quality cottage vendor underquilt, from Jacks or Better, Hammock Gear, Loco Libre, Superior Gear, one of those reputable companies. And I've got a couple from War Bonnet. Any of our cottage vendors, A good solid 20 degree will give you a very large range. You don't have to be camping just in 40 below.
Right. Now I know, all the cottage vendors that you just mentioned, and then, a few others, they are also comfort rated, not survival rated.
Yeah,
And I
and
don't
that's
know
what a
that a
lot of
lot of
people don't
people
realize.
that, yeah, that's what I was going to say. A lot of people don't realize that, especially with your cheaper, you know, like off brand type quilts and stuff, even with sleeping bags, that a lot of them are survival rated. So, a 20-degree survival rated quilt versus a 20-degree comfort rated is a big difference.
Yeah. I mean, if you go to Walmart and you get a Coleman sleeping bag that's rated for 20 degrees, that's really going to be a survival rating.
Yeah.
Means you're not going to die
You won't die
at
at
20
20
degrees,
degrees. You
but
ain't
you
going
are
to be
not going to be
comfortable.
warm. You
You
are
ain't going
not.
to be
You
comfortable
might
at
be
all.
comfortable down to like 50 degrees,
Right.
if that.
And it all depends on your body also and how you, I
Absolutely.
mean, I sleep hot myself. So,
I used to sleep hot.
I mean, a
Now
lot of times,
I'm discovering that I'm sleeping a lot colder nowadays.
you're melting away.
I mean, there's that.
I mean, there's a lot of times that, like we mentioned a minute ago, my go-to under is a 20, but a lot of times I use my 40 top, even, down into the mid to upper 30s. I've used it and still, been warm because of, the heat that my body produces and puts off anyhow.
Right. Another option that I see from a lot of cottage vendors is the foot box on your top quilt.
Yep.
And again, my preference, if I'm doing a 40 degree, I can get like the cinch, the close, or, the zip close or something like that. However, for me, if I'm getting below 40, you better believe that sucker is going to be sewn up.
See, all of mine are sewn.
Yeah. The gear that I just washed, my top quilt, is a cinch.
Right.
But
the only one that I have that is a cinch is the Loco Libre up
okay.
quilt that I have. The rest of them are sewn foot boxes, and that's mainly, it has nothing to do with the warmth or anything like that. What I've noticed with me, anyhow, anytime I use any of the ones that have the cinch or anything like that on it, in the middle of the night, it does not matter. That will end up right up under my damn heel. And it's uncomfortable to me. So I always go with the sewn so I don't have that, bunch of shot cord and everything else, up under my heels at night.
Right. Like a cord wrapping around your toes and cutting circulation off. And
yeah, I mean, whatever can happen will happen with my.
So as far as temperature rating on an underquilt, you're not going to burn up. I would be a little bit more specific on the rating that you're looking for in a top quilt. A 20 degree, again, really is a good starting point. 90% of the year, I do stick with a 40 degree, but a 20 is just nice. You can just, throw it off if you get too hot, but
Right.
Definitely a feel of a top quilt is going to make much more of a difference in the long scheme of things.
Right.
So let's see, the width of the underquilt. So here's an interesting thing so I was talking to Don from Rejects Are Better, and he said that they make all of their quilts 42 inches wide because they found that beyond that, it starts to be less efficient. So I know we're going to have Don on the podcast in the future, so maybe he can go into a little bit more of that. I mean, I like a kind of wider quilt. Like I said, I have a 52-inch New River that is just massive. It's probably
Right.
severely overkill. Um, but I think for me, I really like an underquilt that's probably in the 45, 47 range.
Okay.
Just a little bit more coverage, a little bit more, tuck around my shoulders, a little
Right.
bit of extra something toward the feet. Um, but yeah, I'm interested to see exactly a little bit more of the thought process on, Jax's 42 inches. So now this is for um, underquilts on a gathered end. Uh, Underquilts on a bridge, that's a completely different deal. Um, they're kind of like differentiated cut, but cool thing about a underquilt on a bridge, it's 4 attachment points, and that is all the adjustments. And adjustments can be a big, big pass fail when it comes to underquilts on the gathered end.
Oh yeah. I've set mine up before and didn't have it set just right, and I've known it in the middle of the night.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I know people that have set up a 0 degree underquilt and it was still in the 40s and still froze because
yeah,
they had a draft.
they didn't have it cinched, or they didn't have it, pulled up just right, or yeah, that's how it was with me. You said that about the bridge hammocks, being no fiddle factor. Once it's on, it's on. It's in place. That's what I like about the locally bred jungle pepper, also for the Clark hammocks,
Oh, yeah.
because that's how George designed that. So whenever I put that on my Clark, that's it. It don't slide. It don't do nothing other than keep me warm.
I will say, as far as my bridge hammocks go, George's Ridge Reaper is hands down my favorite underquilt for my Ridge Runner. Great, great quilt.
Well, George always does great quality work. I mean, his quilts are always worth waiting for.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I know Spacgyver just did a video on this, and and I have to echo what he said in his video 100%. The myth of a 3/4 underquilt.
I've never understood a 3/4 underquilt.
So when I first started hammock camping, they appealed to me. They were cheaper because
Well, yeah, you're missing a
when I
quarter of it.
yeah, you're missing a quarter of it. And I didn't know what I didn't know. And so I bought a Airhead Equipment jar bridge, and yeah, not for me, not for me. I just there was a
I've
lot more fiddle factor than a full length, and yeah, I couldn't get a pad to kind of sit in my top quilt the way that I needed to, and my feet just ended up being cold, and
well,
I was
it's
miserable.
I've never actually personally used a 3/4, but that's because whenever I've seen them, they made no sense to me logically. It's like, okay, it's 3/4 of the length, so either my shoulders are going to be cold or my feet are going to be cold because my body is longer than this quilt.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of sort of see if you were using like a 40-degree set, a 3/4 length, and it was only supposed to get down into like the 60s, I guess. I mean, and you were really, really, really focused on weight. I mean, maybe for those people that are the gram weenies that are, counting the ounces, maybe. I'm not that person. I value overall comfort
Yeah,
than necessarily a few ounces. Um,
same here.
yeah. Uh, if you're looking at underquilts, unless you are the gram weenie, you're going to be much, much happier and much, much less frustrated with a full length
Full length.
underquilt. And that goes for a gathered end or a bridge.
Now,
Because I know they do make.
a minute ago, you was talking about a little extra width on an underquilt. Do you ever do any extra length on your underquilts?
Yes. I'm 6 foot even.
Okay.
And again, I like to set it and forget it. So I'll always get my underquilts. If a vendor has an option for a long, I'm totally getting the long. Um,
Just to
the
ensure that
only,
it's up under you. Totally.
just to ensure that it's
Yeah.
up under me. Now, again, I've transitioned to a bridge, so it's not as much of an issue anymore. And we might do an episode of just explaining why I transitioned from a gathered into a bridge. If you guys are interested in that, just leave us a comment and say, "Hey, I'm curious," and so we can talk about that. But yeah, I mean, again, I want to make sure that comfort is the major thing. I'm not a huge. Most of my camping is not hiking, so I don't mind carrying a few extra ounces when I am hiking because I'm also not pumping out 20, 30 miles in a day.
Well, I mean,
Um,
even with me with, you know, the hiking that I do and everything, I mean, I still, prefer comfort over 100% trying to get the lightest weight possible. I mean, because there's that point where you're sacrificing one to get the other. So you just got to figure out, do you want to be a little more comfortable, or do you want to, just be able to say that, you've got your pack down to, you know, 12 and a half pounds versus, 13 pounds or whatever.
yeah, yeah. Your pack may be less than 10 pounds, but you know what else is really really heavy? Hypothermia.
Yeah. Right.
So a couple other things that you can add to your pack when you're going out that will increase your comfort. The first thing is an underquilt protector. Not only does it help protect your quilt from getting wet, a lot of them are made from a calendared fabric, which means that they've taken basically a heating element and almost melted half of the fabric. So it's downproof, so feathers won't get through. It also makes it slightly wind resistant and slightly water resistant. So it's going to keep your quilts dry. It's going to help protect the quilts from the wind trying to steal that heat that you have so graciously built up over the night. And they're fairly light. I usually carry one with me when I'm going somewhere where I know it's going to be rainy or I know that it's going to be crazy cold. If I know that it's going to get down below a temperature rating of my quilt, but not low enough for me to consider definitely dropping to the next temperature rated quilt, I'll throw one of those on there. It's going to add probably 5 to 7 degrees of comfort to your quilt. So to me, it's kind of worth it.
And see, that's something I've never used. I have always been curious about them if they really work like they, say they do. So it's good to hear that. Now, you said that most of them are used, most of them are made out of a calendared material. So with that being said, is there a certain way that they have to go on when you put them on? The calendared side to the quilt or away
Yes.
from the quilt?
Yeah, the calendar side usually goes to the quilt.
Okay.
So the way that you can tell the calendar side for the uncalendar side is the calendar side is going to be kind of shiny,
Right.
where the uncalendared side is going to be more muted.
So why does it go towards
Flat.
the quilt? What's the reasoning behind that?
Um, I don't really think that there is a particular one. It just might your personal preference on what looks
Okay.
better. Um, how I've made a few underquilt protectors, and it's essentially just a um, like I use Dutch's Argon 90 for a
Okay.
lot of mine, or calendared 1.0 Ripstop or 1.1 calendared Ripstop from Ripstop by the Roll, and I just make a 2 yards and sew maybe like a 2 inch or an inch channel on either end after I rolled him besides. So it's kind of like a little mini hammock.
Okay.
But instead of am steel going through the channels at the end, I'll put some probably 1/8 inch um, shot cord, make some loops, and then that just hooks over my suspension on both sides, and it just cinches right under. I've also put some shot cord through the sides so I can kind of cinch up the sides to,
Okay.
again, kind of bring in the underquilt protector, kind of hugging the underquilt. So, again,
Do
preventing
you ever have
those
to
drafts.
do you ever have to worry about it compressing the loft of the underquilt?
No, just because that bungee cord on both sides, it kind of stretches too. So
Okay.
it's not pushing, it's not cinching up tight enough to really compress the down.
Gotcha. Okay.
But you're getting that firm suction to your quilt.
Okay. I'm gonna have to check into getting one and try it out myself.
Another thing that you can add to your pack is a top cover, or a winter sock. That's really the same kind of material that the underquilt protector is made out of. It's kind of a calendared material, but it goes on the top. And as we know, heat rises,
Yep.
and it really keeps that heat down in there. Only disadvantage that I've found with top covers is you do, depending on the air and the humidity and the actual temperature, you can run into some condensation
Okay.
if the temperatures are just right and depending on how you breathe and things like that. So you definitely want to make sure that they are vented. That definitely helps. It doesn't completely negate any condensation that you may get, but it definitely helps to have a little bit of that airflow, but not enough air that's robbing the heat, because that kind of defeats the purpose.
Gotcha. So that would pretty much work the same as the weather shield on the Clark.
Yeah.
Then okay.
And
Gotcha.
again, it's really the main purpose is blocking out the wind, because that is the major factor in the temperature that you're going to be feeling while you're sleeping, is how much the wind is affecting the overall temperature of your body.
Right.
Let's see. So a couple other notes that I had. Your site selection. Site selection is key. Going back to a previous episode that we had, my coldest night in a hammock, or like one of my most miserable nights in a hammock. Site selection was one of the things that I completely screwed up. I set up my hammock in a nice, very picturesque setup right by a creek. The water was rolling by. It looked really pretty. It would look great on Instagram, like chef's kiss. It would have made hammock forums. Where did you hang this weekend? It was very nice. However, I froze my butt off because, for one, it was right by water, and if you hang
Yep.
by water, the wind that comes off the water, the movement of the water, there's always almost a constant breeze. The humidity around that area is going to be higher, so that coldness just kind of pierces through. I did not have an underquilt protector on, so that wind was just robbing the heat from me, even though my quilts were very much temperature rated to the night that it was. For the most part, they were rated for the temperature, maybe not the wind chill. Uh, the temperature, I think, only got down to like 19. I had a 20-degree set, but like the wind chill was like either 11 or maybe even in single digits. I had no top cover, so the air was just blowing off. Oh, by the way, I also had no tarp. So I just hung up a hammock and a quilt, and it's like, oh, I'll be fine. No, I was not. Um, so make sure that all those pieces kind of go in together. So your site selection is really key. Another big factor. You don't want to be right near water, because you will freeze. It will your gear becomes instantly less effective. You also don't want to pitch up really, really high on a ridge, because that's the first contact for wind. Having down in a valley where you've got protection on either one side or both sides is really, really nice. And you also, like we talked about earlier, thinking about how the wind is coming, or at least how the wind is coming when you're setting up, because that may change. But having the broad side of your hammock or broad side of your tarp really blocking that wind will be a huge benefit to you. Some other things that we have, your clothes. Um, I know a lot of people, say, oh, you need to, wear all the clothes that you have. No, you don't. You want to be very strategic and very intentful on the layers that you wear, because if you throw on every piece of clothing that you have, you may actually make yourself colder because they're not working the way that they need to work. In fact, a lot of cases, just a couple layers, a vapor barrier, a kind of a breathable, insulated, wool. Uh, kind of avoid cotton as much as possible. Wool is nice. Some synthetic materials, polyester, um, kind of moisture wicking, because those moisture staying on you can, make you cold. But you don't want to throw in all of your gear, because that kind of constricts and doesn't allow blood to flow the way that it should, and that's where you're going to get cold. That's
Right.
why you wear socks to bed. You get some of those massive, elephant-sized diabetic socks that have absolutely no tension on them whatsoever. Those are really, really nice. I know one of the pairs of socks that I wear when it gets really, really cold. I've got a pair of Thorlow tennis socks that are like for a size 15 foot. Now, granted, I still do have big feet, but it's huge on me. But they're not tight; they're very loose fitting, and they do a really good job of moisture wicking, and they keep my feet warm because they're not tight. Um, or I know in Scouts, when I was in Boy Scouts, they would always say, "Take the socks off," especially like you've been wearing
Yeah.
them all day. That's going to keep your feet warm. So sleeping bare feet, that's also going to allow that blood to flow, that warm
Yep.
blood to travel throughout your body, which is going to heat your colder extremities, like fingers and toes and feet.
Yeah, I take mine off a lot of times whenever it's cold out because I sleep better,
I'm also
sleep
like kind of
warmer.
weirded out by sleeping in socks. I mean, that's just me. I just don't do it. Um, I can't do it most of the time. Even when it gets cold, if I'm once my feet are warmed up, those socks usually come off just
Well,
because.
that's what they say. I mean, they say never go to bed with cold feet. Get your feet warm before you get into the bed and up under the covers and everything.
Oh, absolutely! It's a completely different experience going to bed with cold feet versus warm feet.
When you go to bed with cold feet, it takes forever for them to warm up, if they ever do.
Yep.
So,
So a couple other things that you can use, and I use two of these at HangCon just to stay warm. Um, a hot drink, getting something warm in you before you go to bed is a good helpful. If you don't do coffee, if caffeine kind of messes with you a little bit, I do hot cider. It's a
yeah,
good alternative, or like a hot tea, or an herbal tea. Um,
not alcohol though.
Not alcohol. No, alcohol only gives you the impression that you're warm, but it really doesn't. It thins your blood out, which
Yep.
it doesn't allow your blood to retain some of that heat. So, um, yeah, that hot toddy that you're going to have before bed is only going to temporarily make you feel warmer before it makes you colder. So, sorry, Sugarlands. Another
I
thing,
guess if you drink enough though, it won't really
I mean,
matter.
again, hypothermia is not.
Yes. Oh God.
So, I also used some hot hands and hot feet. That's a kind of really interesting little product. Only problem with that is like a single use thing, so that's not really my jive, but they work in a situation where you have to stay warm. I took some, shook them up, threw them in my gloves, and yeah, they kept my hands warm. Another thing that people swear by, and you got to be careful with this, is a hot water bottle. Like people would boil water, pour it in Nalgene, and put it between their legs where some of their major arteries are. So you're heating up that blood flow.
I hope it don't spring a leak, though.
You better hope it doesn't spring a leak, and you better hope you let it slightly cool before you put a bottle of boiling water between your legs. I can only imagine.
That would be a good tip.
Yeah, a burn in that area would not make for a pleasant trip.
Yeah, no. Probably not.
So, yeah, I mean, if you have any other tips and tricks for those of you who are listening, drop us a line. We'd love to hear what you have used in the past, maybe what has worked, what has not worked, and who knows, something that you may say or a comment that you may give may help make someone's trip 110% better, because being cold and wet on any trip, no matter how good it is, will make it even a good time a little bit miserable.
Oh yeah. Yep. So is there any more that you got?
I believe that's all. That's enough of my rambling for this week, at least.
Okay. Well, I do want to put it out there to everybody that if y'all have any topics that y'all want us to talk about on one of these podcasts, by all means, send me an email or message on Facebook or something, and we'll get these topics out here on the podcast.
Yeah, and along with that, I don't know if we're okay to talk about this yet, but for our listeners, me and Paul are also considering changing up the media system that we're using for the podcast. For those of you that checked out the video that we did, a YouTube live, we really enjoyed that episode that we did with the what was the
Canoe Hound Adventures.
Yeah, that was a blast. He was a great guy to hang out with. We really like the vibe of the YouTube live show, so we're exploring some options of maybe turning the podcast, still keeping the podcast feel, but also offering a live feed, so you can come in and chat with us while we're recording and ask questions, and
have the live chat, and we can also bring people in to to the video itself to ask questions if they so desire. Hopefully also something that will be neat with that is we'll be able to do like drawings, have little contests and stuff periodically, and have a live drawing for everybody that joins in and wants to join in on the chat and everything. So we will keep everybody updated on that. We're just trying to get all the logistics figured out on it and everything. That way when we do start going live, we won't have as many technical issues, I guess to say.
We never have those. What are you talking about?
Never. So hopefully it won't be a whole lot longer though before we get that started. I think that's going to be pretty fun.
We're also still very much recuperating from Hancock.
Yes, sadly, yes. I also want to put it out there. I know it's on the Hammock Hangers podcast, Facebook and Instagram. I think it's on the Instagram. Maybe it's just the Facebook and also HangCon's Facebook. Through the until the end of February, Ripstop by the Roll has a discount code that will get you 15% off your order when you order through, order from Ripstop by the Roll. I'll put this discount code in the show notes as well, but the discount code is HangCon23-15. That's HANGCON 23-15. And that'll get you 15% off your order through Ripstop by the roll. So,
and thanks, Ripstop, for supporting the Hammock Hangers podcast and supporting HangCon the way that you do. You guys do some great stuff. You're a great group of people, and we loved having you in HangCon this year.
Yes, and look forward to hopefully seeing you back there again next year to hang out with us.
Absolutely.
We're gonna have them on the podcast at some point too. So if you don't have anything, AJ, we will call it a night and chat again sometime in the future.
Hey, that sounds like a plan, Paul.
All right, AJ. We will holler at you later then. And everybody else, have a good weekend. And we will have some more chats later.
Happy hanging, everybody.
Thanks for coming on yet again, Pheonix, to go over some of those helpful topics. Hopefully there are some out there that find our chats beneficial and can use them to keep from making the same mistakes that we did when we first started hammocking. If anyone has a certain topic they would like us to talk about and discuss, please send me an email to skunkape@thehammockhangerspodcast.com or message me through Messenger and we will be happy to get those topics on the show. Also, don't forget to use the discount code HangCon23-15 to receive your 15% off on your order from Ripstop by the Roll. That code will also be in the show notes. If you're enjoying the Hammock Hangers podcast and you want to help the show grow, make sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, or any other platform that you are listening from. You can also go to the Hiking Radio Network website, click on the Hammock Hangers podcast page, and leave a review there as well. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as well, and share us with all of your friends. So until next week, happy hanging, everyone.